Okay, making a little more progress on the cabinet. I've got the doors painted in the gray color that I'll probably do for the finish coat. I still have to do some fitting on the edges to get them to fit into the opening. Right now it's a little bit too tight, and I've got to take a little bit off of that corner and then the upper right corner, lower left, upper right, get it to fit in there, and then I'll get the hinges on. So yesterday I did a trial fitting of some of our materials inventory in there. These are all polyurethane bushings, body mount bushings, spring bushing, and we use these for various kits. We kind of mix and match these bushings up to make various body mount kits that we make. It's actually a good thing I did this, because this one right here, this row of boxes, I thought I had a whole bunch of those. I had a couple of boxes from our supplier that I hadn't unpacked yet. It turns out it was all these parts over here and none of those parts over there, and I only have 6 of those left, so we'll have to get another batch of those ordered. The nice thing is I can just look in this cabinet and see exactly how many of those we have. Starting to get some of the other parts that we don't do quite the same volume on up on the top. Getting ready to put the hinges on these doors. Now these are fairly heavy, and I can get 2 wood screws into the bracing that's on these. So these 2 screws go into 1.25 inch wood, so I've got 1.25 inch wood screws. The end screw here only goes into the OSB, so what I'm going to do instead is use a machine screw and put a nut on the back side, and I have that set up so this will go into the solid wood on the side of the cabinet. So the sides are just like this. They've got the OSB and then they have the solid wood, and I think that'll set it up so that these screws, all 3 of them, go into the solid wood. These are just shipping crate pieces, and one thing I found was the edges were very rough, and on like one side the OSB would stick out, and on the other side the wood bracing would stick out, and they're not terribly square. They're just good enough to make a shipping crate. So what I did was spent maybe 5-10 minutes with a power plane and planed everything down so it was flush here. So then I had to do a little bit of scribing work to fit them into the cabinet opening. This would be the lower left corner, and then I had to take some off of the upper right corner on both sides just to get the sides to fit into the cabinet. You know, once I put the hinges on, I might have to take it off and shave down the other side a little bit. So we got the cabinets pretty much finished up here. So I hung the doors, got the hinges lined up. So yeah, I had to do a little bit of work with a power plane to get the top and the bottom edges of the doors shaved down and squared up so they fit into the opening. And then I also had to leave enough room on the side so that when you swing the door open, it doesn't hit the wall. Yeah, so I'm working on adding some lights inside. I added a limit switch here in the just above the center. So as far as a latch, I've got a steel flathead screw in the door stop, and then on the door here, see the edge there, I glued a super magnet in there. So yeah, then when the door shuts, it closes the limit switch. Let's see if I can get on there. With the switch closed, lights off, and then the switch opens and the light turns on. So I've got a second light I'll add in the upper compartment. And I'm just trying to play around with the wiring now, see how I want to run the wires. So I'll probably put some wire loom or something back there once I get everything sorted out. And then I'll probably drill a hole behind the door stop and run 12 volts out of the bottom here. And then underneath, I want to pick up some under cabinet lighting and then have those to light up the area over the freezer, since this cabinet basically blocks all the overhead light. The other thing I had to do, just a minor change, is up here on the top. There was no support for that top of that OSB up there, the sheet I put, and it was a little bit warped. It hung down a little bit in the middle. So what I did was screwed it up into a piece of 2x4 that I got off an old pallet, just to pull the center of that OSB up so that the door would fit. See, one other thing I need to add over here on the back corner is I'm going to run some wire mold down the corner between the cabinet and the wall, and that'll be the 24 volt DC circuit for the freezer. So I'll have that on the wall. So I guess I need to look at the installation manual for the freezer and see if I need to have the power down low or is it up high. I don't know where the power connector is, which means I've got to run 24 volt DC into the garage area here. Behind the camera here, there's a wall between the garage and the house, and the upper part of that wall is into the house attic. Right now I have a 12 volt DC circuit run over here to power all the lights in the garage. But what I'm going to do is just change that 12 volt circuit, connect it to 24 volts off my battery bank. That'll be off of the SBMS 120 DC load output. But then I need 12 volts out here in the garage, so I've got a 30 amp DC step down converter that I'll hook up out here, and then I'll have the entire garage powered off that 30 amp step down converter, and then the rest of the house will be off the 20 amp output of my MPPT charge controller. So that way I've got 20 amps for most of the house, and then I've got 30 amps out here. Every once in a while I hit a situation, if I have all the lights on out here, and then I've got stuff like my home heating system has a lot of 12 volt DC draw, and then for instance if I turn on my media PC, which has the DC power supply, that startup surge is enough to push it over the 20 amp limit, and then the charge controller shuts off the DC power with an overload error, and then you've got to turn it back on manually. That's inconvenient when it happens, so I figure by moving the garage onto a separate power supply, that takes all of this power out here, because I've got a lot of lights out here. I probably have close to 200 watts of DC load out here. Kind of doing a bunch of things all at once, but this was the key part I wanted to get in there, because this had to be here so I can get all my inventory up out of the way there. So I made some 3D printed handles that came out pretty nice. But yeah, really happy with the way that came out. I think I spent less than $50 on this whole cabinet. I had the lights, I had to buy the limit switches. That was the main expense, was buying the hinges, and then I had to buy the 2 pieces of 1x3 that I made, the wall supports, and then as well the supports that went underneath the bottom shelf there. And everything else was just scrap. A lot of scrap got used up, and it's all now put to a new purpose. So I guess the next thing I got to do is I got to get my order in for the 24 volt chest freezer and see what kind of backlog there is on that. It could be a long time, but I figure this freezer is still working, it's still functional. I've got this built. Once I get the 24 volt circuit run down here, I'm ready for the DC freezer to show up whenever it shows up, and then I just have to wheel this one out, wheel the other one in, and I'm up and running. Plug it in and go.